Monday. I'm just trying to figure out how to
Yeah,
orient
no
myself
worries.
here.
No worries. We'll just get set up.
I think Lily wants to say hi.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever actually met her.
Here she is.
Hi, Lily.
Hey, say hi.
She's like, when is it my turn to get interviewed? What's up, Josh?
Tito said hi. Do you say hi too? Joshua says hi.
How's baby life, mom life?
It's pretty good. Last night was pretty wild.
Yeah.
She's usually like a really good sleeper, and I don't know what happened last night. She was not.
Is it always like unpredictable like that?
No, that's what's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Because usually she is, ever since she was about 2 months, she's been sleeping like through the night and everything, which is great,
Hmm.
um, pretty consistently. And then, I don't know, just the last few days, I think she's going through a little sleep regression or something. She's just a little bit fragile in her sleep and harder to get to go to bed at night and then waking up at random times and stuff. But, I do that as an adult, so.
There you go. Cool. Well, we already started recording. You're probably so used to performance mode.
Well,
Um,
but not speaking. Like anytime I have to talk, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Really? How often do you do a lot of either lectures or interviews
Yeah.
even?
I've done a few different lecture recitals, and usually for those, I have like everything I'm going to say, like literally written out, like a
Okay.
paper,
Yeah.
and I've written it in a style that's, good for not so much just like a paper, but,
Yeah.
a script for me to follow.
Right.
Um, and then, but oh my gosh, when I was teaching, I taught music history classes and voice study classes at a couple different universities in the area, and I was just always feel so like awkward, like I was just like stumbling over myself talking, and
Yeah.
which I'm sure it wasn't that bad, but just when you listen back to yourself or like you
Sure.
you become aware of what you're saying, you're like, oh my gosh, what
Yeah.
that was a tangent I just went off on.
Yeah. This
Hmm.
is probably a good challenge for both of us because I'm the same exact way in that, like, I could tell right away we were very similar when I asked you to do this. You asked exactly what I would ask if somebody asked the same thing. Like, okay, so what should I prepare for?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we're gonna get along just well because um, when I used to do the interviews, I also kind of scripted out the how I wanted to do it. And in
Hmm.
some ways it's good because it forces you to really kind of shape how you want,
Yeah.
moderate the conversation and all that.
Hmm.
But I've just realized that it was taking up a lot of my time, and it was just like I couldn't commit that much time to it
Yeah.
with a day job and all that. So it just made it more stressful. So I like that we're both have that preparation mindset. But my
Hmm.
thing right now is I have like a few checkpoints.
Hmm.
Like I've narrowed it down to like a couple bullet points, which is
Yeah.
like that is pretty crazy because usually I would do all the paragraphs and all that. But
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully it'll just be kind of chill and
Yeah.
we'll just go through how the conversation wherever it takes us basically.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Karen, it's really cool that I get to say that I'm going to interview a professional opera singer.
Yeah. Well, so let me modify that a little bit. So
Yeah.
I don't do actually that much opera.
Okay,
It's
cool. Yeah.
it's like um I feel like a lot of people just kind of say I'm an opera singer when they mean I'm a classical singer, because
Okay.
like that's like what people like know right away. Like if you say I focus on concert repertoire, they'd be like, oh, I kind of like I know those words, but I
Right.
don't really know like the like industry jargon of like what that means. So you just say opera singer because then people know like I know what that kind of voice sounds like.
I see.
And like
Okay.
that's the same like vocal technique, vocal sound that I'm using for the singing I do, but I don't often appear in actual operas.
Okay. So it's a
So,
blanket term that's used because it's kind of the most understandable way for people who
yeah,
don't
I think
know.
so. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I guess when someone you don't know comes up to you and does the whole, so what do you do, Karen?
Hmm.
How do you respond to that to give them kind of the best?
Yeah.
short form answer.
I've started saying like I often because singers often have to and all musicians have to just like have their hands in so many different like pots on the stove because it's hard to make ends meet with just like one thing.
Hmm.
So I often will just say I work in the classical music industry because like everything I do is centered around classical music. But it's like I don't do just one thing, and it's hard to like quickly say, in your like elevator pitch sort of
Yeah.
format, like what do you
Yeah.
do? So that's usually what I say. And if they like follow up with more questions, I'll go into details of like, I sing with orchestras in the region and I do a lot of work with choral ensembles. And then I'm also a music director at a church in the area. And up until recently, I did admin work for an opera company based in New York. So all those different, like, kind of all the different things you can do in classical music,
Yeah.
you know, the church work, performance work, and nonprofit admin work is usually where we all tend to end up doing,
Right.
doing all those things.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that because you're right. Like my initial kind of umbrella term was like, oh, she's an opera singer.
Mm-hmm.
But opera in this specific, what would you call it, genre or style? It's
Yeah, well, opera is, yeah, I would call it a genre, a style,
right.
an art form. And, I love to do it when I can.
Hmm.
But it's just such a, I kind of stopped pursuing opera just because like it's such a huge time commitment.
Mm.
If you are lucky enough to get a contract somewhere, you're gone for like months potentially, in a different state across the country or something. And I just knew for like what I wanted my life to look like. Obviously, I just had a baby.
Yeah.
I have a husband. I have a cat. I have a home. I have a life here in Grand Rapids. I'm like, I can't see myself being okay with like taking off for a month or two and just like being like, see ya, and then coming back. It just wasn't going to work out. And it, my heart lies more in the like the concert work kind of repertoire. And when I say that, I'm talking about like when you go see Handel's Messiah, there's like four soloists.
Hmm.
So I would be like the alto soloist for that, or I might be in the chorus sometimes too. Um, so there's or both. Sometimes you get a gig where it's like you're singing in the chorus and you get to step forward and do the solo. So you're just like doing double duty. So
Right.
that's what I mean by concert work, like doing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, other symphonic works like Mahler's Second Symphony. There's a great alto solo in that. That kind of repertoire and the choral literature, that's kind of where more my heart is like, oh, I love this music. This is what I want to sing. And the opera track is just so like, it's so competitive. It's so time consuming. And yeah, my heart was not in that music enough to be like, I'm willing to commit my life to this. So yeah, that's why I kind of shifted more towards doing that concert repertoire and choral work more.
Gotcha. So it's more localized within like
Yeah.
a home kind of location
Yeah.
versus
And even if you do get like a gig singing a Beethoven nine somewhere, you're gone for a weekend. You get
mm,
on the plane, you fly out for like a rehearsal the day before the gig, you do the gig, and then you come home. It's not months of like doing stage work and rehearsals and, all the work that goes into an opera is it's just much more intense.
gotcha. So it's like going
Hmm.
out on tour like for long
Yeah.
periods of time.
Yeah.
And that's is that how traditionally operas function?
It depends on the company. I really like I've long been an advocate for making opera companies more local to who's in their area.
Right.
It just would I feel like it would save the like opera is kind of like struggling as an industry to have money to fill the seats to do the productions. And I think that a lot of the cost could be saved if you didn't have to, fly in singers from all over the place, find housing for them, pay for food and lodge and all that kind of stuff. If you pulled from the wealth of singers that you have in your own area who have a home, who don't have to travel, who, you don't have to pay for any lodging for them or anything. I feel like that could be a lot more sustainable for the industry. But that's just no one listens to me. Those kinds of things. I don't have a company, so I can't implement those.
I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. Like I'm surprised that there's no like. So we're in Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a local Grand Rapids opera?
Yes, that we have Opera Grand Rapids here. They pull local people for the smaller roles, but for the big starring roles, very sometimes they have local people do more prominent starring roles, but most often they're flying in people that are more famous or whatever, which is like fine, but I don't know. To me, it's like we have in Grand Rapids, we have voices that could do those starring roles stunningly. Mm. And most cities that have, if they're a big enough city to have an opera company, they probably have the voices too. There's enough people who do this that like you have people you could pull. And I feel like especially like if you want to keep an opera company sustainable, obviously you have to be like pulling in younger people. And, there's some truth that like older people go to things like the symphony and the opera because they have time and money to do so. So as, millennials get older, we will probably go to the symphony and the opera more often as we get older, because we will then be the generation that has more time and more money because we're retired. We don't have our kids at home anymore, and we're getting into other things. But at the same time, like if you're not fostering an interest in that music when people are younger and making more opportunities and reasons for them to go, like they're less likely to go when they do have the time and resources to go. So I feel like if you have like people in the community doing the starring roles, you're more likely to like pull those people's friends and family that live in that area in to go actually see the show and buy a ticket than if it's like this random person that is famous in the opera world, but like the local people of Grand Rapids don't know their name. They're not following who's famous in opera right now. So they have no interest really in going to see this singer sing the lead in La Boheme. But if, it's like, oh, that person lives in my neighborhood. I know who that person is. They're a friend of mine. I'm going to go see them because like, I'm invested in seeing what they're up to, in hearing them sing. I want to be supportive of my local community, of my neighborhood. And I just feel like it's a way to make not just the financials more sustainable of like saving costs on bringing singers in, but on actually like selling tickets, because you have an incentive then for people to actually go and see the show.
Right. I was going to ask you, what do you think the rationale is? Is it strictly a marketing thing in that like it's a more well-known name?
I think so. I think it's that you need to have a star, but honestly, it's like opera is becoming so niche that it's like, you don't need to have a star because there's a good chance that 90% of the people who could come to your show haven't heard of them anyways. So, and they're a great voice, but like, so is this person who lives right here in our own community. They're an awesome voice. And what a cool thing it would be to give a local singer in your community an opportunity to do a cool role and to like expand their resume and to become more, experienced in the field and actually give them work to do, instead of making them fly out to some other place. It's like we all keep trading our opera singers. Let's just focus on who we have in the area that we're in.
It sounds political. Like, is there a lot of politics in that world? As far
it's extremely. As like... I feel like it's like one of those. Well, I mean, let's be honest. It's like it's kind of dominated by like older, rich white people. So that like ties there. It tends to be like conservative in that like they're not going to do anything too edgy, and when they do things that are edgy, it's like, okay, like you were trying to be edgy.
I see.
and it didn't really like
you could
land.
sniff it out.
Yeah and there's a lot of problematic stuff in the opera literature because it's like old music from like the 19th century, when things like exoticism were like just staples of classical music. And so there's just it's a minefield of like, it's like, when do you put away this repertoire that is like written in a way that is kind of problematic? Not kind of, it is problematic.
Yeah.
But also you want to study the repertoire. It's great music. Like, so how do you balance like doing this work that is like super problematic with also like, not being problematic yourself and not perpetuating something. I love that, when companies can do new operas. I'm kind of bothered by like when I see companies like they will reimagine these older works in like a new way that it's like, it's kind of cool, but it just becomes kind of like, I don't know. It just becomes a little silly to me. I don't know. I don't want to say anything that's going to like get me opera canceled.
Yeah, opera canceled. The worst kind of canceling.
But it's just like, I don't know, if we would focus on like, just like
something new.
Yeah, something new, and getting like singers who can actually like deliver a really dramatic, like theatrical performance rather than just like kind of sort of singing well. It's just, that's to me, it's like opera itself is like really compelling if you have like really good singers who will commit to how ridiculous it is. Opera is kind of ridiculous in that like we're up on stage like singing in this crazy way and everything is sung and it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's pure craziness. And the plots are often so stupid and so weird and unbelievable. So if you can just like commit to the music that is there and it's like really good, like that's what gets people in the seats, like to go and hear something that just like makes the hair on your neck stand on end because it's so like vocally stunning. Right. And a theatrical delivery that is just like gut wrenching. Like that's what will get people to go to the opera again, not making this opera Super Mario Brothers. Like, I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I love this. I'm wondering, because when you're in the classical world or in the opera world, at the highest level, technique and performance is kind of like mandatory. Mm-hmm. Where do you find the balance of emotion and like the ridiculousness and embracing, I don't know, would I say imperfections in a performance to make it more human feeling? Where do you balance that technique perfection versus imperfection?
Well, I definitely have not mastered the technique of like singing so well that it is itself theatrical, but I think that's where it is that if you just let the human voice be what it is, when you do sing masterfully, it conveys so much theatrical just presence. Committing to the musical lines that the composer wrote for that opera and finding the phrasing that just captures that musical line, that would convey all the theatrical presence that you need. And I think sadly we've lost a lot of that in the opera world. There's just become like this kind of obsession with like things other than the actual singing, of like finding the subtext in what Puccini wrote and just like getting a little too like cerebral about it, which is, it's fine. It's good. And I love to do that kind of thing with some of the repertoire I'm studying, and just like really get into it and really, I have a background in musicology. So I'm like, I love to get nerdy. I love to get cerebral with things and then analyze and like come up with all these theories about everything. To me, opera is just like, it's about the voice. That's fundamentally what it's about. And everything that like really great opera composers have written, the theatricality, if it's a piece that really stands the test of time and is truly magnificent, the theatricality is in the notes that they wrote. And if you can sing it masterfully enough, that theatricality is theatricality a word? I don't know if now. That theatrical I keep using the word presence, but I don't know if that's a good way to describe it or not, but that's just what's coming to mind. That will be there on the stage. And I mean, honestly, I think that's what had people going to the opera, was to hear really beautiful music. And there's something about the human voice. I think most people agree, whether, they don't have to love opera, but they have some singer that like moves them and gives them goosebumps or raises the hair on your neck when you hear a
Yeah.
certain line, a certain note. There's something about the human voice that we all kind of connect with because we are all humans and we all have a voice, whether or not we sing. We are drawn to it. And so
Yeah.
I think that is really what the appeal of opera is.
It's almost subliminal in that even if you don't know classical music or technique, it's not about that high F sharp or whatever note.
Mm-hmm.
It's the other stuff that you can't really explain that a performer, if they're able to capture that,
Yeah.
is the magic in all of it.
Yeah. And a lot of it is, I really think it is just hearing people use their voice in such a masterful way.
Yeah.
Like we know it when we hear it. In any genre, there can be people who are using their voice just masterfully. And
Yeah.
we know it when we hear it.
I guess rolling back a little bit from like when you started and you were talking about how like, I'm sure there's more than two paths, but there was like a fork in the road of like opera or like classical repertoire. Was there ever a point where like the dream was opera, but then your life kind of goals or missions have changed? Like where were you at like when you were younger, beginning this journey? Like how did that kind of go about?
Yeah. And well, I will say just to like clarify how the industry works, that a lot of people who do opera, they're doing the concert work gigs as well, because like
Sure.
especially the more famous opera singers, like every symphony wants to hire them to come sing their Messiah,
Yeah.
every Christmas or whatever. But so for me, it's hard to remember if I ever was like, I want to be an opera star. I don't think it was ever really a thing that I was like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna like be very unhappy with my life.
Yeah.
I went to music school as a very green, inexperienced musician. I grew up in an area where there weren't a lot of opportunities, very rural area. And so when I went to music school, I didn't know much. I hadn't heard, I hadn't really heard an opera that much. I was kind of familiar with some choral music, was more like, and more instrumental classical music was kind of the extent of what I had been exposed to. And then as I was starting music school and just hearing all these different things, I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, all this different stuff. It was just like opening my eyes. And I was like, I love all this music so much. And so I started out as a music education major in college. And then I think like after my first semester, even, I was like, this is not the track I want to do. I thought I wanted to be like a high school choir director, but I think I would be eaten alive by high schoolers. I don't have the energy to teach, every day, be up like that. I can't do that. I think I took like a couple weeks of like the intro to like music education class. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind. And so I dropped that class. And then the next semester I switched my major to to voice performance, which is to like train you to just be a singer. That's, I kind of then thought like, okay, I have to do opera because that's what like this is for. This major is for people who want to do opera. Mm-hmm. But at my school, there was no opera program essentially. Like they didn't put on operas every semester. It was more focused on choral music. And so I was, in the university choir and we were going on tours and we were just having so much fun and the music was so compelling to me. But I still thought, like I have to be an opera singer. Like that's what I'm studying to be. I have to figure out a way to make this work, even though like my school doesn't really even have opera. So I then went on to do master's degrees. I first did one in musicology, and just as a way because I was really interested in that field. I really nerd out about music and love to study the history and the social aspects of it and everything. But I also did that as a way to like do something to continue my education while I could still also continue developing my voice, because I knew vocally I was not ready for like a master's degree in voice performance. So after I finished that, then I went on again to do a second master's in voice performance, where there were a few more opportunities for me to do some opera work and everything. but I still was like, like I'm not getting the experience that would be necessary to like take off into the opera world. And I don't really, by then I was like, I know I want to have kids. I know that I want to be married and have like a local life. I can't see myself being okay with just like, traveling all over the country potentially, and or even committing to the life of what it would take to even get to that point. Because again, it's so competitive and it's just kind of wears you down with the way the system works.
Yeah.
That you have to go through all these young artist programs that like don't pay their singers anything. It's just not like, it was just not a lifestyle I was willing to commit to ever, I don't think. And so I chose to like, I think I did have to have kind of a like heart to heart with myself and say like, it's okay to not pursue opera. Like, even though like you did these degrees that's like supposed to be what you do after you get these degrees, it's okay to focus on choral music. It's okay to focus just on concert repertoire and recitals and art song and stuff like that. If that's more where your heart is and more where you feel like your life could actually work with this, instead of making your life work around work, make work around your life.
Yeah.
I just said the word work so many times.
Yeah, work. Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense. It sounds way more sustainable
Yeah.
for the place in your life. Some people might want that other lifestyle, and that's completely cool. But that's great that you were able to sit down with yourself and actually think that through. Was that very easy? Was that an easy decision, or was it like
Yeah.
years of mental anguish of like, am
I
I
don't think it
a
was
failure
mental.
type thing?
Yeah. I don't think it was mental. It was more just kind of like when you have to let yourself be okay with like, that you're not doing like what all your friends are doing kind of thing. I don't think I was ever that like, of all the mental anguish I've had in my life, it wasn't very high up there because
Right.
it kind of was like a decision that was sort of almost made for me, I feel like, but that I was okay with.
Yeah.
Because it's just like the choices I made earlier in my life, the schools I went to, I just like, I didn't go to the right places for that to become the launching pad for me. I went to places where choral music and more recital type work and concert work were more of the like obvious launching pad. And thankfully that's, like how I wanted my life to be and how the music that I was more drawn to and everything. I will say I do love when I do get to do some opera things. I love like being in a costume. I love being on stage and like
Yeah.
getting to wear like stage makeup and a wig and all this stuff. Like it's super fun, but I don't want to live my life around that,
Yeah.
I like to just like be in the chorus every now and then and get my cute little costume and be on stage and ham it up and all that
Yeah.
stuff
You just
without
need
having to be the star.
right.
Yeah.
That fills your cup enough, and then you can go
Yeah.
back to your normal kind
Yeah.
of sustainable way. One of the things on my list that I wanted to ask you was, so I'm about over a decade removed from like the classical music world. I used to be in band playing saxophone. I actually auditioned. I was gonna go into a music ed major.
Yeah.
I didn't get accepted to the schools that I wanted to go to, so it kind of like threw me on a different path, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I was curious about just the resilience that someone needs to audition this much.
Yeah.
How have you managed to just auditioning just in general? I'm sure it's just like, I don't know, do you still get the jitters? Like what is the mental feeling during these auditions, and how have you learned to like get better at auditioning?
Yeah. I don't do as many live auditions anymore. COVID really changed all that. A lot of things are now like they have the option to like send in a video audition. Whereas before that was like not a thing. That's like it was a pre-screen. You send in your recordings as a pre-screening to be invited to come do the live audition. And a lot of people are going back to more live auditions and stuff, but I haven't really jumped back on the live audition train as much since COVID. I just kind of, stopped doing that. And then kind of was like, I don't really feel the need to like try to figure out a way to fly to whatever, Atlanta, Georgia to audition for this choral ensemble on a, chance that I might get in.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to try to find something more local to do that maybe doesn't require an audition or something.
Yeah.
But I think auditioning and like performing kind of go hand in hand with like the nerve to get up and do it and to
Yeah.
like steel yourself for it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think with both of those things, both auditioning and performing, really like the only way you can get better at it is to just do it. It's like a callus. Like the first few times you do it, like you're going to get a blister and it's going to hurt and it's going to suck. And you're going to be like, I'm never doing this again. Like I really hurt myself. I really beat myself up doing that. But then you do it a few more times and that blister turns into a rough spot on you, a callus that doesn't bother you so much when it gets rubbed and when it, because you're using it. It's a skill that you're using. And yeah, the only way to get through it is to like do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's weird how like I can like be doing a big solo with like an orchestra or something and I'm not that nervous for some reason. And then like I'm doing like a little solo at like a tiny little church in town and like I'm sitting in the pew and I'm like shaking and it doesn't like it kind of just depends on like how you are that day, I think, what's going to bother you and what's going to not. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always when I used to perform a lot more, sometimes like I would just want to get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes like where I am in the program is a little bit later. And
I
it's
hate that.
just that waiting is brutal.
It's so brutal.
But there's like that, I don't know, for me, I don't know how it kind of manifests in you, but like after I do that performance, I always have a stomach ache.
Yeah.
I don't know if yours happens before or after or doesn't at all, but mine is like stomach ache after.
Okay. Yeah, I usually feel like physically better once I've done it and I'm not like have the adrenaline of like building up to it anymore.
Uh-huh.
But I am a mental reviewer in a bad way. Like I get off the stage and I'm like, okay, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. This was really bad. And like, I know intellectually like that the audience probably doesn't know.
Yeah.
They're not familiar enough with this piece to know that like that note didn't belong in there. And cause it wasn't a note that's not in the chord, but it just wasn't the right note.
Right.
Or that, that most people don't take a breath in that line. Like they're not aware of those things the way, you are. So I always try to intellectually like remind myself of those things, but emotionally you just feel like gutted that you didn't do the best that you can do, or that you're like, that you're not at that level yet, potentially, like it's a lifelong journey to like be a singer. So, you can't beat yourself up too much.
Right. How's your mind space during the performance? Like, are you mentally reviewing yourself while it's happening? Like,
unfortunately, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I always like if there's like a camera recording, so like happening that I'm like, I'm going to use this for like my next time I need to send in a Bach aria to this ensemble for an audition. I'm going to have a great recording. And then I'll like do something in it. And I'm like, well, I can't use this recording.
Yeah. While you're still performing.
Yeah. While I'm singing, like recording shot. Oh,
Yeah.
well, next time, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's horrible to do. And I try so hard to just be present in the moment. But sometimes your brain just gets the better of you and you end up mentally reviewing things and you're like, why can't I just focus on this moment?
Can you remember a time when you felt completely free in the performance and you weren't kind of overthinking it?
Actually, I do. It was a very rare unicorn moment for me.
We all have that. It's only one our entire life or something,
And it was great because it was such a special thing because I think it was the first thing I did post like COVID that was like in front of an audience and wasn't just a recording somewhere. I did a little lecture recital at a university in town, and I had gone through during COVID. I didn't have COVID. I don't think if I had COVID, it was too early in the game where like we didn't know much about it and it wasn't tested and stuff like that.
Right in the beginning. Yeah.
It was even before that. It was before like anyone had even heard of COVID-19. So I don't think it was. I think I just had a really bad flu or something.
Yeah.
And I got terrible bronchitis. And I don't know if I went back to singing too quickly or if it was just the way it was going to be. But my voice did not bounce back from like all the coughing and all of the like trauma that my respiratory system went through that.
Yeah.
And it was devastating. Like I thought that like I was done as a singer, that I was never going to get to sing again really. And that it was just over for me. Cause it took a good like year and a half to like get to a place where I was like vocally okay. And I had to see, you know, laryngologists and, voice therapists, all the whole thing. Really emotionally difficult. One of the darkest periods of my life, honestly. And it was in the midst of COVID. So it's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Thankfully it did happen then when, you know, like I had time to rest and I wasn't like having to like say no to gigs and stuff because my voice wasn't okay. So it was probably the ideal time to be going through something like that, but still it was just incredibly difficult. And then, I got this little gig to do this lecture recital, and it was just enough work to just like help rehabilitate me and get me to where I wanted to, you know, closer to where I wanted to be vocally. And when I did that recital, you know, being able to be back in front of an audience in the performance hall and not have it to just be a recording or something, and finally feeling kind of okay in my voice again. It was like, I don't know, it was just different. Yeah. I wasn't mentally reviewing. I remember specifically finishing that program and being like, I didn't mentally review myself through that whole thing.
Yeah.
It was just like a new, fresh experience. And it was just, yeah, it was one of the best feelings ever to just be happy to sing again and not be like judging myself through the whole thing.
Isn't that such a gift? Because it's like we all do this creative work for that moment. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't happen as often as we'd like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that because I don't know. I feel like I want to ask that to everybody now. It's like when was the time where you felt like you weren't overanalyzing yourself? Because even I'm sure as we're sitting here now, I'm like, okay, are the audio levels okay? Is the video still recording?
Yeah.
Like there's this part in my brain that's worried that when I press stop, it's not going to save the recording.
Yeah.
You know, but when I'm thinking about it, it's like, I'm actually really enjoying this conversation with you. Mm-hmm. Why can't I just shut off everything else? And then it's the same way with like performance and like art and music. Yeah. It's like, how do we get to that place where we can be completely free in the moment, then analyze later? That's part of improvement and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you have certain kind of, when you find yourself overthinking while you're performing, do you then try to snap yourself out of it? Or
I try to, like, okay. But it, you know, it's hard. You know, it's hard to shut off that little voice, that little critic in your ear mm-hmm. that's just always there. And in the moment, sometimes too, you forget to even do that. You know, because you're just like so, I don't know, just like you're just trying to get through it. Yeah. I remember sometimes like right before a concert, like another soloist that I'm with, I'm like, I turn to them and like, I hate this. Why do I do this to myself? I love it when it's over and I can look back on it and be like, that was such a great experience. I love it in like the couple months leading up to the gig where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this really cool gig coming up and I love working on this music and this is going to be so fun. I hate it in like the week before when it's crunch time and I've got to actually travel to where I'm going. I've got to do all the logistics and I'm up at night worrying of like, what if I get in a car accident? What if this goes wrong? What all this, you know, stuff.
Did I leave the oven on? Yeah.
Yeah. Just like crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then during the gig, I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this to myself? I hate this. I hate singing. I hate being up in front of people. I hate having to be up and doing all this. And then once it's over, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was such a beautiful experience. I loved that so much. And I sign up for the next thing. It's just this cycle.
I guess that's the life cycle of that process.
Yeah.
And I guess with anything, like when I think about my dogs or even Lily, your newborn, there's like a percentage where it's just like, this is madness.
Yes.
Why did I sign up for this? Mm-hmm. But then the small percentage makes up for the small percentage of like love and magic and just pure bliss is like, yep, I'll do it again. You know?
Yeah. It's like they say, like, which I have to, after having gone through childbirth, I have beef with the thing that people say that you don't remember the pain. It's like, you do.
You remember the pain. Yeah.
I totally remember that pain.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I would go through it again if it meant, this. But it is like, you don't necessarily forget like how hard it is, but you're just like, I made it through that and it was worth it. It was hard to travel to that gig. It was hard to like go through those rehearsals with that conductor and to feel that conductor and to feel inadequate and to have them ask you to do this thing and to tell you, we're not going to do the da capo of your aria that you worked so hard on to get all the ornaments just perfect and everything. It's hard to go through that, but
yeah.
You remember the really good things when you look back on it. Like, I got to work with this dear friend as a soloist beside me. I got to have my parents come and hear me sing at that gig because it was close to where they live. I got to wear a really pretty dress. I got to do my art and to get paid for it in a way that felt like honoring of what I do and not insulting for once. It just is, there's things you look back on that are like, that was a good experience.
Yeah.
And I would go through the trouble of doing it again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully not as painful as last time, but I'm still willing to. I'm still willing to be in there, be in the trenches.
Yeah.
It helps having people that understand it too. Like you said, like having colleagues that are in the trenches with you, and that you can go, why are we doing this to ourselves? Even just the slight someone going, I know, right?
Yeah.
Is all we need to keep going to the next step.
Yeah. I love when I turn to the soprano soloist with me and I'm like, I hate singing. And she's like, me too.
Yeah. The thing we're doing right now, I hate it. Yeah.
But then we're done. And we're like, oh, I loved that. It was so great. It was so nice to work with you. It was such fun out there. The audience loved it. I got such energy from them. Yeah. That's
beautiful. Yeah, Karen, that was so much fun. Thanks for your time. I know like life is busy with a baby. I'm glad we were able to like find some time today.
Yeah, me too. It's been my dream to be on a podcast. So
you've never been?
I haven't. This is baby's first podcast.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna press stop on the record. This is the thing that freaks me out when I press stop.